The topic of leadership has captivated people for a long time, and over the last couple of decades, interest has grown exponentially. Leadership has become a highly valued commodity, and organizations across the globe are trying to develop it in search of better performance. What do we know about leadership? To a large extent, scholars nowadays agree that, first, leadership is a process. It does not reside in the leader, but occurs in the relationship between leaders and their followers. For all of us, it's obvious that leaders affect their followers. But do we realize that followers affect their leaders as well? Scholars also agree that the very essence of leadership is influence, and also that leadership occurs at all levels of the organization, not just at the top. In that sense, leadership is a non-hierarchical concept. Why do some people emerge as leaders and others not? In the early 20th century, the great man theory emerged to explain this, and this theory also flourished. It was believed that leadership is a combination of special, inborn traits that some very unique individuals possess. The idea behind this perspective is to compile a list of common characteristics possessed by effective leaders. The next step would be to identify the individuals with those characteristics and assign to them leadership roles. In other words, leaders are born, not made, so we just need to select and not train them. Initially, this approach seemed quite promising. But then in the 30s and 40s of the 19th century, it was challenged. Why? Because the list of characteristics had grown longer and longer. Even height was considered one of the attributes. But great man theories failed to guarantee leadership success, and scholars became discouraged with the trait perspective. The next approach to leadership defined it as an act or behavior of the leader. Are democratic leaders, for example, more effective than autocratic leaders? At first glance, the question might look pretty straightforward. But can you think of an occupation or, for example, a situation when democratic leadership might not necessarily be a good approach? How about the foreman of a firefighter brigade asking his team members to vote about which site they will enter a burning building? Or a military commander with a participative decision-making style during a combat operation? Obviously, this approach has its limits as well. Leadership clearly happens in a context, and a leadership style might fit in one situation, but be counterproductive in another. This approach fails to take context into consideration. The third wave of research was the so-called contingency approach, which means it all depends. For example, on the characteristics of the followers, the nature of work, the type of organization, etc. This perspective takes into consideration the situation and argues that we need different leadership styles in different situations. This sounds logical, but still doesn't answer the question of whether leaders are born or made. I personally believe that leaders are made, and made primarily by themselves, by their personal development more than by any external factor. And although we might find romantic ideas of leadership quite attractive, that great achievements are made thanks only to great men or great women, let's not create the myth of the heroic leader, but recognize the role of followers as well. After all, Throughout our lives, we play dual roles. In some cases, we lead, while in others, we follow.